Hello. Welcome back to the Connected Wellness Podcast. I am Rachel Ann. We're here with a very wonderful special guest that we'll introduce in a second, and also the very wonderful Marianne. And we're all so passionate about wellness.
Here in this podcast, we look at the ways that our physical, emotional, and spiritual health is all connected and how we can take better care of our whole selves holistically so we can live our best lives. We're really excited that you're here with us on the journey. Welcome to episode 38 of the podcast. Thank you for joining us, and thank you so much, Charlotte, for being here. We're happy to have you.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Oh, yay. We're so excited, y'all. Episode 38. Here we are. We are rolling. We are doing this. One day I'll stop feeling nervous for an episode, but until then, I'm excited to be nervous with y'all. We have a really awesome episode planned for today. We'll talk about what it's going to look like and why we have the wonderful Charlotte joining us. But before that, we'll hop right into our wellness wins. Would anybody like to start with their wellness win?
I can start us off, sure.
Cool.
So mine is just that I feel like I did a better job than usual setting some boundaries recently with a family member that sometimes we could like clash, if I don't say like exactly what I like need to say, and I let things go until I get really upset and then it becomes like a blowout. But there was a couple instances recently where I said, no, I'm not going to talk about this, or, I'm not going to hear this from you right now. And I kind of set these boundaries and it was like really worked. And when I was done, I was like, wow, that I feel like I should have done this a long time ago. But I know we have talked about boundaries a lot. We've talked about saying no a lot here on the podcast as something that I specifically need to learn to do. But I felt like I was able to do this not in an abrasive or aggressive way, just like from this is what I need, you're my loved one. And it was a pretty good outcome. So I was pleased with that.
Yay.
Yeah.
That's
Nice.
amazing.
Thank
For those of
you.
you who have been with us for a minute, you know that boundaries is something we are on a journey to learn about. So rock on, Marianne. That's really awesome. Yay.
Thanks. How about you guys?
Charlotte, you feeling like you want to share, or do you want to wait a second?
No, I'm good. Yeah, I'm in Dallas, where I grew up, helping my family out. My mom had a knee surgery, and my dad also has limited mobility right now. So I've been doing quite a lot. I just jumped in with caregiving, and it got intense pretty quickly. And so one thing I was feeling like is I need to make sure like to create, even if it's like 30 minutes for myself. And I've been just going on walks. So that's something I normally would do when I'm back in the city. But just that like 30-minute walk and then time to like stretch and just think has made all the difference. And just finding like micro moments, that's more than a micro, but something small that helps me to reclaim that one part of my day and my sanity. So that is my wellness win, just figuring out what I need and handling it. So, yeah.
That's a great, girl. Yes, those micro moments. They may be micro, but the impact is quite macro, I would say.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome.
Great. Yeah.
My wellness one is kind of similar to Charlotte's, is that I have been stretching more. And so I think I shared that I'm recovering from a knee injury. I also have scoliosis in my back, so my back gets sore pretty easily. And I notice that when I don't stretch or when I don't do my exercises for my knee or my back, things get worse. And then when I do the stretches and the exercises, things get better. And so for the past week, I'm usually pretty good about it, but I think I just kind of fell off. And so for the past week, I've been really, really on it. And I'm like, wow, like I'm noticing like my knee is not in as much pain. I'm noticing it has more strength in it. I'm noticing my back is not hurting when usually would hurt when I like bend over or do whatever. And so I had that moment of like, oh, it works. Like when I do what I'm supposed to do, I actually feel better. Because sometimes I'm like, I don't think it's going to do anything. Like I get really in my head about it. So the wellness one is one, I'm listening to my PT and everything, and two, I'm actually experiencing the relief of pain.
Mhm.
So I'm happy about that, and the hope is that I continue that.
That positive reinforcement is everything, man. So, sometimes
Hmm.
when you just see that glimpse of like, yes, this is working, it's such a good motivator, to keep going. So that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good job, wellness wins. Good job, team. We are on the journey of wellness.
Hmm.
And as always, we invite y'all to share your wellness wins. So leave it down in the comments, DM us, email us, let us know so we can celebrate you. Alrighty, let's hop into the good stuff. So today, we have the wonderful Charlotte, and we're going to be talking about rest and identity. Specifically, though, what aspects of our identity factors, how we live our lives, and how that allows us to rest, make it difficult for us to rest. Maybe there are pressures or connotations that we have about rest. So, how do those two things work together? How do they not work together? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And we have the wonderful Charlotte joining, and I am going to share her bio, which will tell you why she is one of the best people that we can have to have this conversation about rest and identity. So, Charlotte is the founder and a president of Cultivate Vibrance. Her leadership has been visionary, strategic, relational, and results oriented. Her experience is diverse, from leading a nonprofit in New York City to conference and event planning to creating DEI programming that successfully created pathways for emerging leaders of color. Most importantly, she is a daughter, an auntie, a runner, a community builder, and a woman of faith. So, thank you again, Charlotte, for coming to spend your time with us, share your wisdom with us. And let's just start off like super basic, super high level. Talk to us about, as people who have identity factors and layers to our identity, what does it have to do with rest? And what maybe it doesn't have anything to do with rest. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll share by way of a story I've been thinking about.
Mm,
A number of years ago, I was working. I was a conference planner, and I was coming off of a busy conference. Um, and after that time, our organization was like, we had some wins, but we had some major losses.
mm,
And I usually was during the time that we would just take a break, but the organization was like, let's continue to work so that we can get this right for the next year. Um, I think at that time I knew I probably should consider, what my future was going to be like with the organization. But so much, I had invested so much in being there.
mm,
I was very tied to this identity of being a conference planner, doing things perfectly, having people see me in a certain way. Um, and a lot of my time was invested there, but a lot of my identity was invested there.
mm,
And so it became difficult to figure out what does rest look like when I had an identity that I wanted to uphold, not just in
mm,
a work environment, but also in my, amongst my peers, amongst my family, amongst my community. And so I think sometimes when we have these nice jobs or these things that we really wanted, that have a little clout to them, or at least they bring us validation. We
mm,
can do things that are outside of our character and outside of
mm,
what is helpful for us in order to hold on to that. And so that's one of the reasons why I've been thinking a lot about rest and identity in the places that we find our identity, and how some of those might at times compromise a sense of rest.
mm. Whew, that's real, girl. There
Yeah,
are
we're coming
things
out the
we
gate.
do. Yeah, I was like, okay, strong. You got me at the whole thing, but especially at the like, there are things we may do that's outside of our character because of the pressures we may be feeling at our job or even like other things.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
I think also
yeah.
that idea that we get that sense of identity from our work. So, who am
Mm,
I outside of this work? And sometimes, if we lose that job or we change to a different job or whatever it is, that and we had no other anchored identity outside of that, you become completely lost.
mm,
And who am I? So I think I love that idea that, okay, we might find part of our identity in our work, in our vocation, in our calling, but where is the part of our identity that will always be there in rest, in the calm
Mm,
moments, right, in the peaceful moments. So yeah, that's a really interesting thing to think about.
mm,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Man, thinking about that, I would love to hear your thoughts about for people. How do I want to phrase this? Okay, this is how I want to phrase it. So, a lot of our audience we're people of color, we're children of immigrants, or we are immigrants. We are followers of Christ, and we're high achievers. We're like, yo, let's do it. It's embedded in our cultures and how we were raised, also in the society that we live in that says we need to be successful monetarily. So, I don't know. I would love to hear your thoughts about for people like that who have so many priorities, how can they think about rest, and what does time outside of work or time for rest for busy people really look like?
Yeah, so I'm always going to take us back to the foundation. I think we often we often do things, but we don't realize why we do them. So we're
Mm,
carrying on with our life, with our decisions, with our commitments, and we're not really, we just don't haven't taken inventory, as to why we do those things. And so I think some of it is understanding some of those identities that we hold. I'm also
mm,
a child of immigrants. Sorry, but I have to question, what does that mean for me? It means that I
mm,
come from people who had to work hard to survive. I came from people who don't want me to have to work as hard. They want me to not struggle. But the other part of that is that um, I'm losing my train of thought. Sorry, but they don't want me to have to struggle, and so that means that I can do a lot of things, and I can dream, but I still want to feel like I'm making them proud. So that becomes
mm,
part of it. I have to question just all the different things, the things people have said to me, all those things that I've felt that I've taken on as true,
mm,
and think about those messages that I've internalized, and even sifting through, are they true or not? So, as a high achieving person, I think we need time to really just have a sense of awareness, whether it's your quiet time in the morning and really allowing the scriptures to search you. But a lot of times you might even need something else, right? So I think exercise is good, just space and time for you to be able to um, get to know yourself a lot better. There's this book called The Gift of Being Yourself by David Benner, and he talks
mm,
about you look at yourself and then you look at the word, and they're both
mm,
a mirror of who you are and who God is, and it's a ping pong. I feel like for a long time I was just looking at the word, and I didn't really look at myself. I didn't know a lot about myself. I wasn't on a
mm,
journey to get to know, my own stories and why I make decisions a certain way. And so, that can, and depending on what faith tradition you come from, that might even feel selfish. It might
yeah.
feel sinful to be like, oh, I'm going to look more into myself.
Mm,
And so I think we do ourselves a disservice if we don't know who we are, if we're not on some sort of journey of awareness. And then we can be able to figure out, like, how do I incorporate rest, and what are the things that feel like over functioning versus this
mm,
is just a season that's busy, but
mm,
I'll find my pockets of rest, or this is a season that's difficult, but I'll find the things that can at least give me hope or joy or replenishment in the midst of that. So, yeah.
Hmm.
mm. Wow.
Yeah.
I love that call to like be on a self discovery journey. And that's real, right? As immigrants or children of immigrants, I feel like it's almost a privilege or a luxury to be able to have time to discover and wonder about ourselves,
Yeah, for sure.
because of all the layers that we're dealing with. So I think that's valid. And the way that how rest may look for you may be different than how it looks for somebody else. Even if you have many shared identities, it just might look different because y'all are still different people.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I love too
Yeah.
the idea of looking at scripture to look inward. And you
Mm,
said some people may think, oh, that sounds like too self indulgent or, too selfish. But really, again, if as believers, we know that number one, first and foremost, I was made in the image of God. So if I want to
mm-hmm,
understand what am I, who am I, what is my identity, then of course I must look to who is God. So who
mm-hmm,
is He and how did He make me? And yeah, that's That's super powerful. And I
Mm,
also, I mean, I know this is not the topic really, but like it makes us have such a sense of self worth and value,
Mm-hmm.
and
It is
maybe
a topic, yeah.
that that would allow me to prioritize rest a little bit more, perhaps, right? Knowing,
mm,
of what value I have been created and, for purposes other than worldly success and the things that you were discussing, Rachel Ann. So yeah, I'm interested in that book you mentioned. We'll have to maybe share it.
mm,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'll share with you. Actually, one of my counselors, I would go to her office and she would have this library of books. And each week I would read this one book because it's a trilogy, but I would read the book. And so it felt like I had counseling with David Benner beforehand. And then I had counseling with her. But it was the first time that someone said it was okay as a Christian to like be more interested and introspective about who you are.
Mm,
Because as you
mm,
said, Rachel Ann, we are taught like, look at we're created in the image of God, we're created in his likeness, but we have to have a mirror to ask ourselves, like, am I living my life like this?
mm.
Where's the mismatch here? And we can spend the rest of our life
Girl.
trying to do that, right? Um, but being able to say like, okay, if this is the image, the likeness, the worthiness that I have because I was created in his image, where am I trying in my own might, in my different identities, am I, chasing these followers, this money, this clout? Where am I trying to be created in my own image or the
mhm,
image of people who I want, to
Mm,
like me or to approve me? And that word and that self reflection, they bounce off of
mm,
each other for us to better
mm,
understand how we're being developed. And I've been reading a lot in Genesis lately. I'm not going to say a lot. I'm reading a Bible plan, okay, and it's been in Genesis. But what's been crazy, it started in Genesis. And so they were saying just this about likeness and image, but
mm,
then it connected it to the part in, I believe it's Matthew, or just the Gospels, where Jesus is being tempted. And I
mm,
never realized that it was pointing out how um, Satan was tempting Jesus with his identity, things that were already true of him. And so
mm.
that's what's at stake for us. Like
Wow.
we're being tempted to find our identity in other places and
Mm,
things that are already true about us,
mm,
right? And so we're
mm,
spinning our wheels, we're tired. And I'm not against being tired because that's just part of life. Like in terms of you work, you will be tired. You put in, workers worth their wages. This is part of what God has for us, work as worship. Um,
mm,
but I do think that I too struggle like living in New York City with trying to define myself in a way that feels like it's worthy before other people while forgetting that I already have this worth.
mhm,
I'm being
mm,
tempted with something that's already true of me.
mm,
So it's going to take some sacrifice on my end. And that's what I'm learning. That's the gap between that I'm wrestling with right now is um, how do I sacrifice and actively say I'm okay or I'm not okay, but I'm going to learn to be okay with the truth of who I am
mm,
versus the one that I know will kind of get me this worldly affirmation or even affirmation that I genuinely need, but just
mm,
coming from ways that ultimately are not going to be helpful or healthy.
mhm,
mm. Whew, girl, you got me at the when I forgot how you said it. You said it much more beautifully than I'm about to say right now. But how we are comparing our identity to what it means to be image bearers. And I'm like, yo, there are some places where it does not line up. Where what
Mm,
I'm doing, how I'm living my life, how I'm viewing myself and other people does not line up with what the Bible says an image bearer of God does or thinks or acts or all of that. And I think That's a real call. I feel like there's this call, low key, that you are inviting us to, which is to explore and say, what does it mean to be a follower of Christ? And in what ways is my life lining up with that or not lining up with that? Not to be like legalistic and not to be filled with shame, but just to
Mm-hmm.
like explore and notice the gaps and say, oh, there are like legit gaps here. And maybe because the enemy does trick us with things of the world to give us that validation, to be like, yeah, like you just need this thing, you don't need the Lord. So, what is it that I am being tricked into doing or believing that is, in essence, replacing a space where God could be coming in and speaking to us? And one of those times of, or in those times of rest, I feel like it becomes so restful because we are with the Lord. And, you know, the Bible talks about how his yoke is easy, his burden is light. God himself rested, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
when in the creation story, he created everything, and on day 7, he's like, "I'm gonna just like hang out for a little bit. I'm gonna just rest." He didn't need to. He's not like tired, but that shows us that if God Himself rested, how much more as people do we need to rest with Him, and in inviting Him into rest, how it can be really fulfilling, not something that is fleeting, not something that's superficial, but something that literally fuels our soul when we rest with the Lord in that way.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's an iceberg. Like, I think that this gets into, and I see this whether you're a Christian or not. How do you what do you the gap between what you believe and who you are, and we will spend a lifetime untangling those things because there's so much reward in being something
Mm.
that isn't actually who you are, or that's
Mm.
actually not helpful. And
Mm.
so I think I have, I there's so much, like you said, it's not shame. There's so much grace, but there's a lot of reward to abandon yourself. There's a lot of
Mm.
reward there,
Wow.
and so to choose, and a lot of times I don't know if we just wake up one day and choose. For me, I can say that it has been and it is going through a hard season. So it's going through. This has worked for me in the past. I know what it's like to like have people really celebrating who I am and my work, and then for that to change and to say, God, nothing changed. Something's changed in what I did, but
Mm.
more or less, I've changed for the better. And so, asking those questions, those crisis situations, coupled with life. And I'd be
Mm.
interested to hear about you guys. I think it's those crisis situations that really start us on asking these chain of questions of, is who I am and this work that I've been doing, or these things that I've been trusting in, and all the effort that's going there, is it really worth it? Is it who I
Mm.
am? Is it who I want to be?
Mm.
Um, and in doing the work of saying, if nobody else is going to give one more applause, I believe that God is who He said He is. And even if you don't believe, I believe that there's someone out there. I can even get with that. I believe that there's someone out there that the way I'm currently living, they are beyond this, um, and that I need to figure out how to mend the gap.
Mm.
So yeah,
Wow.
So all that introspection requires rest, right?
it does.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. We did 2 episodes actually on hurry and countering the hurry
Mm.
epidemic, and I do remember the statement: you cannot connect with God in a hurry. And I think you
Mm.
also cannot connect with yourself in a hurry. You know, when your brain is scattered and you have all these things on your to-do list and you're running from here to there, that's not the time that you can sit and look inward and ask yourself these super important questions that you're talking about, Charlotte. So um, I think that leads me to the question that there are multiple types of rest, right? Like there's rest
Mm.
that, okay, obviously if I'm physically tired or I haven't slept or I've been running physically around, yes, I need physical rest for my body, but there's other types of rest too. What type of rest is it that allows me to connect with myself, that allows me to connect with God, that allows me to connect with my loved ones? So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but Do we
Mm.
identify these different types of rests? Do I seek them out individually? I say, oh, I'm going to take a nap because I need physical rest, and then I'm going to do this because I need spiritual rest.
Yeah. Well, I think one great resource, Dr. I want to say Sandra Dalton Smith. She has the book on, she has the TED Talk, the book on seven types of rest.
Mm,
And so that's a really great resource. She says that sometimes you need digital rest, sometimes you need creative
Mm.
rest.
mm,
Sometimes you actually just need to lay your butt down and go to sleep rest, right?
mhm,
You need different kinds of rest. Um, and so I think that's a good framework to at least get you to think of some different categories. And then even you can read those, but then, go through and say, okay, what does it look like for me to have digital rest? Maybe it means
Mm.
putting a timer on my phone of how much time I spend on social media, or maybe it means I have days or afternoons, a Sabbath afternoon, where I let the people that are important in my life know, hey, I turn my phone off between this time. If you need me, if it's an emergency, call the police because I'm not answering,
Mm.
figure out what that is for you and spend some time daydreaming about what those things are so that when you are in that space and also creating time for that rest. So when you are in that space, then you already have things to go to because now you're thinking, I have this day, I have this afternoon. And if you're someone who's used to like going really, really like high paced, um,
Mm.
the idea of just coming to a stop all of a sudden or having that weekly rhythm, I have a kind of, I'm trying to work it back into the start of life, but a Sabbath. And so if you have like a weekly Sabbath, a 24-hour or a half day Sabbath, it's helpful to know beforehand what it is that you want to do during that time. And then also, I think, I've heard people say, which has been helpful for me. Sometimes we think like we're just going to be sitting here doing nothing or sitting here
Mhm.
like read your Bible and get in the Word. But also, part of like the traditional Jewish Sabbath, from what I've read, is that you enjoy friends, you enjoy family, you enjoy
Mhm.
good food. So
Mm.
I've enjoyed my days off or my Sabbaths where I go to a restaurant and I just have good food. And I just build that into my budget, and I'm going to have a
Mhm.
good meal. And I do the things that feel uh, recharging for me and for my spirit.
mhm.
Mm. I love that.
Yeah, when we talked about Sabbath before in those Hurry episodes, I remember the
Mhm.
writer of the book that I had read about Hurry described Sabbath as doing things that allow you to delight in the gifts of the Lord. So, yeah, family, friends,
Mm.
good food, things like that definitely fall into that category. So, yeah, kind of enjoying his goodness and taking the time to thank him for those good things. So, I remember the word delight, which really sounds wonderful, versus the idea of I'm just going to sit here and do nothing, all day.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I like that.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think part of it too, like I'm grateful for every, church organization I've been part of. I do think that there's been an undercurrent of if you're enjoying yourself, if you like have fun, that there's something wrong with that, that there's something
Mm.
inherently wrong because we're Christians and everything should be difficult. But I think what that restores is like, no, God wants us to be able to enjoy like the fruits of our labor, to enjoy what He's created, and to really like challenge our view of Him and our
Mm.
view of maybe what we've learned in some of the spaces that we've been at that kind of suck the joy out of being able to live and be someone that's in relationship with God.
Hmm.
Mm. That's beautiful. You mentioned being able to sit with him and kind of having a moment to notice the messages that you know about him and how you know him personally. I'm kind of curious, I mean, in the work that you do and in your own life, are there certain like messages that you have learned about rest, or are there like certain sayings that you have heard that you're like, oh no, this is not accurate when it comes to rest?
Hmm. Mm. Well, here I will start here. Is rest is equal to trust, and that might be a huge statement.
Mm. Mm.
Um, but I do believe it, and I'm saying rest broadly, I don't worship rest. I think that rest is a tool and it's a gift. When the children of Israel were in Egypt, that was about rest. They were in hard, oppressive work, and all that they wanted to do is, or not they, but all Moses wanted to do was to be able to say, let my people go to worship me, to have some
Mm,
space, right? That whole thing was about rest.
mm,
And so we find that ultimate fulfillment in Christ, and Him being our jubilee, our full fulfillment of rest.
mm,
Um, I forgot the rest of the question, but trust and rest, I feel like those are pretty synonymous. And then I do
mm,
think we really do again have to question the messages, not in it, well, I should say in addition to work, but in our faith communities where we celebrate, where we may celebrate. I don't want to say everybody. My church does a great job of making sure, you serve once a month, and that's the
mm.
commitment. But beyond that, that's on you to kind of, manage. Um, but I think that we have to ask ourselves what messages do we have about rest, from our upbringing, from our church communities, our faith communities, from our culture. Um,
Mm,
what did we see growing up? Because some things are not always verbally said. It's what we saw growing up, right? And so
mm,
asking ourselves, what did it look like for the Black woman in our life, our mom, or whomever, or to did we ever see them rest, or what did it
mm.
look like to see them, just watching their lives? Was it always grind, or did we see them have time to be able to just like take that wig off, take that bra off, and just be okay?
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's real. That's real. I have another question, but Marianne is our timekeeper. Marianne, do we have time for
Oh
one more
yeah, yeah,
question?
we have time.
Okay, cool. Um, a lot of what you're talking about, especially as people of color, we are collectivistic people, and this idea of rest. And so a lot of what you're talking about, it sounds like individualized rest. Like, yeah, make sure
Hmm.
you take time off of your phone. Make sure you just go take a nap, girl, right? Very, very real. I'm curious about your thoughts as communal rest. Is that a
Hmm.
thing? What does that look like? Or is rest only something to do as like an individual?
Yeah, I think it's so I think there's solitude, which is different from isolation. So maybe some of your decisions are, individual, and ones where you recharge, or just rhythms or principles that you're putting in place in your life to be able to have some guardrails in your life. So that is more individual. I love this story from, I think his name is John Mark Comer. He used to be over at church in Oregon, in Portland. But he talks about how in their church they would take, or not the church that he's at now, but he has a community of people that they take Sabbath rest together. And so that
Wow.
means that they're all they're not, they know, like, we're not calling each other about work, that kind of stuff. And their kids, they all spend time together, and so it gives a different feel. And I know for myself, before I started being a founder, I was a leader of a team.
Mm,
And one of the things that I realized probably a year in is that we are all working ourselves to death over here, and it's causing
mm,
friction.
mm,
And so we started reading Emotionally Healthy Leader as a team,
mm,
and we would read that once a month. But we also took Mondays as our Monday morning Sabbath. So I was like, do what you want during that time, but there's no expectation for us to answer emails, calls,
mm,
schedule meetings during that time. That is your morning. And we also made sure to communicate like our end of the day, and there's no expectation to communicate outside of that or before that. And so
mm,
that gave us shared language to work from. It gave us a space because, sometimes you want to take a break, but then someone's like texting, emailing, and it's
mm,
helpful if you all are all working off of the same grid, the same language. You all can all be on a shared uh, not vision, but yeah, I mean, for lack of better words, I do think, as someone who's a single who lives in New York City, I realized that what we created on our team at that time was not the norm. And even if it's not your team, so I think there's two things there. As a leader, you have the opportunity to set the pace for the people that you lead. And if that's, if you call it a Sabbath, or if you're in a workplace that's not necessarily, like a Christian based place, however you want to call that, you can implement principles that are, Sabbath, but call them something
Mm,
else, whatever it is, that will be helpful, because those principles are helpful for everybody,
mm-hmm,
and they're a witness too. So, but I would say one thing that I do want to do more of, and I think that this is a little bit of where I'm getting to with, John Mark Comer, is what does it look like to have people in your life that you all talk about keeping the Sabbath together, and whether
mm,
it's that accountability, whether it's that shared meal together once a month, whatever it
mm,
is, those are the things that I know I want to see incorporated more in my life. And I think that at times the city can work against that. So you want to be um, extra intentional about finding people, not giving up when you're like, dang it, it's like
mm.
two of us looking at each other. Well, it's gonna be two of you looking at each other, Sabbathing together, you know. Like, I
Yeah.
think it's gonna take some work to get some rest,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And to be encouraged by it, because again, we go back to Exodus. It took some work. Like,
mm,
it took some work for Moses to keep going down to a Pharaoh who was like having your attention, having your mental space, having your labor. Like,
mm.
that's valuable.
Yeah.
And I believe that Moses realized that. And even in his fear, he kept going back and
Mm-hmm.
saying, this is what God has told me, let my people go, because who we
Wow.
are and what we bring is incredibly valuable. And so we
Mm-hmm.
got to fight for that through
Mm,
creating space for rest.
Mm.
mm. Ooh. Wow. That was a very powerful note to end on. We need to fight for that space to rest. Because
Yeah.
our lives be busy, girl. Our bosses
Yeah.
may not. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm a little bit biased in this. But for people who have a boss
You got
that's
to tell
not
yourself.
themselves, girl, that's real. I need to plan my vacation days ahead of time. I need, because
Yeah.
I will just work and be like, oh, I haven't vacated in like 6 months. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
that is so incredible. I'm trying to think, Charlotte, for people who are hearing these things and maybe they're like, I would love to know more about this. How can I connect with you? Do you
Yeah.
have events coming up? Are there ways that people can touch base with you?
Yeah, so Instagram, cultivate underscore vibrance, we're there.
Okay.
LinkedIn, we're kind of there, right? And then you can email me. I'll be honest with you. I think, we also have to think about what are the spaces online that feel like they, might challenge, or they're a rub to who we're trying to be and our goals,
Mm,
with our identity, with our rest. And so if those two aren't it, you can go on our website, cultivatevibrance.org, join our newsletter, and get something that might feel a bit more manageable.
mm,
Email me at Charlotte, two T's and an E, at cultivatevibrance.org. Our next event is June 14th. We'll be in
mm,
Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy. Rachel will join us. And we'll have just a nice summer kickoff, hang out, kick back, what the kids call it. And we can hang out. We'll have some mental health tips there.
mm,
But then lastly, there's also some information on our website.
mm,
The 7 Day Rest Rhythm is something we did back in March. You can definitely tap into that for 7 days of encouragement, scripture,
wow.
meditation, daily challenges that usually last less than 5 to 10 minutes that you can
Oh,
incorporate in your day to prioritize rest. So, all of those
Wow.
things, get in where you fit in, do what you can.
Okay. I love that. Get in where you fit in. There are so many ways that you make yourself available to people. And I think that, especially along the lines of rest, right? Because being on Instagram, that may not be restful for some folks. So that's real. Oh wow. Marion, anything from you before we say goodbye and let people go figure out what rest looks like for them?
just my big takeaway is I want to try that. Like, do not put my phone on do not disturb for a couple hours a week.
Mm,
So yeah, I was
mm,
thinking about that as soon as you mentioned that. So yeah, there's so many things I think we could take away from this, and just look for. You mentioned micro moments. Yeah, so even
Mm-hmm.
just if I could carve out some micro moments of rest maybe they can coalesce into bigger moments of rest, bigger times of rest in the
Yeah.
future. But thank you so much. Yeah, it was a lot to think about, and I'm looking forward to checking out the 7 day rest that you mentioned. Yeah.
Mm.
So
Nice.
thank you so much, and yeah, we hope to hear from everybody what you think about this, and if you have any suggestions, what works for you. Right, Rachel?
Yep.
Did you tell them how to get in touch with us?
I did not do that, so I can do that very quickly now. So that's how to get in touch with Charlotte. Please make sure you do that because she has so many great things. Her and her org, they have so many great things going on. If you want to touch base with us, we'd love to hear from you. So you can hit us up on Instagram at Connected Wellness Podcast. You can email us if that's more your vibe at connectedwellnesspodcast@gmail.com. If you want to reach out to Marianne specifically, you can contact her on Instagram at Waba Saba. If you want to reach out to me specifically, you can reach out to me on Instagram at Real with Rachel Ann. All of that, including Charlotte's info, will be linked below. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Charlotte, for all of the nuggets that you have dropped and shared with us. Lots to be thinking about, lots to incorporate. Yeah, and I'll pass it over to Marianne for our goodbye for today's episode.
Thanks again, Charlotte, for being here, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Until next time, be well.
Yes, be well,
Bye
everybody.
bye.
Bye.